Welcome to our March MoFilm monthly meetup. So excited to have you guys all here on a Saturday morning and continuing to join us. My name is Andrea Sporsic-Klund. I'm the film commissioner for the state of Missouri, and I run the Missouri Film Office, which is me, the Missouri Film Office. So, real quickly, I want to invite you to check out our website, MoFilm.org. I'll put it in the chat. There's some great resources, including a list of film festivals in Missouri. So you can go right to that page, the film festivals page on our website, mofilm.org, to find 16 currently. We have 16 annual film festivals across the state, and they're very diverse. We have a children's film festival, Film Fest 4-H, that's for youth. We have a college film festival called Fault Line in Cape Girardeau for college films. The True Falls Film Festival, documentary films, which will be represented here today. Two wonderful regional big city festivals in Kansas City and St. Louis. We have the Ozark Mountain Web Fest down in the Branson area. So all kinds of different film festivals. We co-host these sessions with the Missouri Motion Media Association. I want to introduce Joni Tackett to give you a little bit of a MoMMA update.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joni Tackett. I am the past president of Missouri Motion Media Association and still on the board. And MoMMA is a statewide organization, and we work on watching things happening at the state level that affect our industry in Missouri. And one of our primary missions is to get the film incentive reinstated in Missouri. So we are working diligently this legislative session to support a bill that has been filed by Senator Denny Hoskins. And that bill was voted out of its first committee. So it's one of many steps that need to happen, but it was a positive step. And if you would like to join our organization or follow along in that mission, you can visit our website at MoMMA, MoMMA online.com. And membership is just $25. So we hope that you will consider joining our organization. And we are happy to help Andrea and support her mission. We're partnering with her on these monthly meetups. So that's it. We are also on Facebook if you want to like us on Facebook and follow along with what's happening with our organization. Thanks for joining and a happy spring.
All right, thank you, Joni. We're going to transition to our panel now, and I'm excited to introduce you to our moderator, Stacey Woelfel, who has been with the prestigious University of Missouri Journalism Department for many years, and is also actively involved with several film festivals in our state, Kansas City Film Fest and True Falls, right, Stacey? So
sure, yeah, do a little screening for St. Louis as well, so all across the state.
All right, and he's going to introduce us to our panel. So let's learn about film festival programming.
Hi, everybody. Glad you could be here today. And I think there's probably some filmmakers out there who are very interested in how to get their films into some festivals. So we've got three experts here, and I'm going to introduce them, and I'm going to read it because they have detailed histories here, and I don't want to follow that up. So first up, Angela Catalano comes to life in darkened rooms and projection booths as a curator, filmmaker, and projectionist. In 2013, Angela co-founded Shotgun Cinema, a New Orleans-based nonprofit film exhibitor and projection equipment provider, where she curates pop-up screenings and guest speakers. Her academic and visual work focuses on crowdsourced surveillance and aesthetics of labor. She served on juries for the New Orleans Film Festival, Denver Film Festival, and Portland Film Festival, and is the former programming manager for the Milwaukee Film Festival. She moonlights as a projectionist and technical director at places like True Falls, Sidewalk Film Festival, Key West Film Festival, and the Overlook Film Festival. She teaches film studies courses at the University of New Orleans and received her Master of Arts in Cinema, Media, and Digital Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and is the newest programmer at True Falls right here in Columbia. Chris Clark is the artistic director for Cinema St. Louis, has been there since 2000. He first started as volunteer and later became a board member at Cinema St. Louis before being hired full-time. He draws on his background in film studies, mass media, and public event coordination, and he's been an integral part of many of the organizational logistical changes that have led to growth and expansion for the St. Louis International Film Festival. He's been on the front lines of developing and producing an ever-increasing number of annual film-related events produced by Cinema St. Louis, including its flagship event, the St. Louis International Film Festival, the St. Louis Filmmaker Showcase, the Classic French Film Festival, and Q-Fest St. Louis. Chris says it's his dream job and he wants to keep it indefinitely by living forever. So he's so far so good. Brian Colley is a playwright, screenwriter, and graphic designer from Kansas City. He's a short film screener for the Kansas City Film Fest International, and he's the founder of the Kansas City Screenwriters and the Midwest Dramatist Center, where he serves on the board of directors. He writes and produces a play annually for the Kansas City Fringe Festival, where he is an active volunteer. In his spare time, he is an avid film enthusiast, as is, I think, everybody on the call here. So welcome, Brian, Chris, and Angela. Thanks for coming. So we have 3 programmers here, but you represent more than 3 festivals. And what I thought we'd start out is just to talk a little bit about the festivals with which you work, your role with that, and what those festivals look for. So Angela, let's start with you.
Hi, thanks, Stacey. It's I cringe a little hearing my bio read aloud.
We all do. We all do.
Pick that apart, yeah. Hi, it's nice meeting all of you. I recently moved to Columbia, Missouri, excuse me, from New Orleans. So True False, pardon me, is my primary festival right now. I've been doing curatorial work for about the past 15 years. And I also, as was mentioned in my bio, I do a lot of technical work as well. For me, it sort of goes hand in hand with the curatorial process. I like knowing what a film is supposed to look and sound like, in short. So I still do technical work for one of the co-tech directors for the Overlook Film Fest, which is a genre film festival that, like in the before times, was taking place in New Orleans. Hopefully it still takes place, as well as this the Key West Film Festival and at Sidewalk. And I sort of, whenever any of my friends on the circuit need a projectionist, I generally get a call. So it's been a really wonderful path of trying different festivals that range genres as well.
Perfect. All right, Chris, you curate a number of festivals right there in St. Louis. So can you kind of run through those for us?
Yeah, when I first started, the only event that we did, and in fact, the name of the organization at the time was the St. Louis International Film Festival. And we changed a couple of years later because we started adding events. The first event we added was the St. Louis Filmmaker Showcase, which was inaugurated by the then St. Louis Film Office, which there's a newer, smaller version, but in its last year, in its first run, the St. Louis Film Office started this event. We took that over and then we started other things. A couple of things came and gone. We were the local host of 40 Hour Film Project for a number of years after KDHX left it go. Then we have since let it go. Q-Fest is our newest event at 14 years old, also doing the Classic French Film Festival. So we always have more than one thing going on at the same time. And with the last year, I'm sure we'll talk about it, the massive paradigm shift going from producing live events in theaters with films and people and popcorn for decades. What the heck were we going to do? So we learned a lot last year and we did all of our events virtually and wound up intact on the other end. And here we are. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Brian, over on your side of the state?
Yeah, the only festival I work with is the Kansas City Film Fest. There are 2 major film festivals in Kansas City. Ours is one of them. The other one is on the Kansas side, the Kansas International Film Festival. I'm not really involved with them at all. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of smaller film festivals, usually pretty niche film festivals to make like a gay and lesbian film festival or something like that. Mm-hmm. There's a Jewish film festival. And I think a Japanese film festival, but they're all very small. There'll just be a few films in each of those. And then there's a lot of groups, organizations in town, like the Independent Filmmakers Coalition, which is filmmakers that get together and they often do events themselves, like a 48-hour film festival kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. For each of you, the different festivals that you manage, do you have different roles? So Brian, at KC Film Fest, are you doing fiction, nonfiction? What sort of films are you screening and programming there?
We have feature films, and we have documentary films, and then a whole slate of short films that are both feature and documentaries. And then we
And
have
are you programming? Are you
category.
programming all of those, or?
And I am focused almost exclusively on short films. So
Yeah.
I'm a short film expert. I don't really get involved in the others.
Great. Angela, what about you? At True False obviously is all documentaries, but at the other festivals, are you doing any fiction?
I have in the past, yeah. So the Milwaukee Film Festival was sort of like I oversaw all of the programming, and I had some programmers that I was working with, and not festival related, but Shotgun Cinema. We primarily focused on experimental film. So yeah, kind of running a nice gambit of genres.
And I know you're programming at True False, both features and shorts, so you're looking across the board.
Correct, yeah. And nonfiction is used sort of loosely sometimes
Right.
as well.
Right. Chris, at the 4 festivals under the Cinema St. Louis umbrella, are you focused on any particular part of that programming?
Focus. What the heck is focus? No, we're all over we're a small staff. And then as we built, we haven't gotten substantially bigger. So I do different levels of things for everything. The least I do is the classic French Film Festival, which Cliff, it's all, 6 to 8 films, sometimes 10, maybe as many as 12. Cliff does that. And these are all classic restorations of older French films. So I've almost nothing to do with that except for handing out tickets and programs and stuff. So the St. Louis Filmmaker Showcase, I do it all. I watch them all, program it all, put the shows together, everything. The St. Louis Internet and Q-Fest, I do it all also. I have a programming committee that helps me review films, and we discuss what is the best fit. This year we had to shrink back a little bit. Still have a nice slate. And then for the International Festival, that has mutated over time because my roles have changed. Now I am primarily narrative features, studio films, American indies, anything that's fiction. Mm-hmm. And except shorts. I don't do shorts either. So more narrowly focused in that event, but it's much larger.
And maybe just for sake of definition for everybody else, True Falls, Kansas City Film Fest, St. Louis Film Fest, all are international film festivals. Q-Fest, I think, is as well. Yes. for you guys. Yes. But St. Louis Filmmaker Showcase, what do you define as a St. Louis filmmaker?
Loose. We give the confines, and we embrace our neighbor state of Illinois because we're a river, we're a border city. So if you live within 120 miles circle, and we can be loose with that. Sometimes we include Kansas City films in, but the center is a strong connection to St. Louis or St. Louis area. So if we go too far out, it doesn't make as much sense because the audiences wouldn't be there. So we try to focus, and we've never had a problem getting to a critical mass of films. It's been spooky. It's been between 100 to 112 submissions every year for 20 years, almost to the number. There was one year there was more, and one year was a few less, but almost to the number. And these aren't the same people. So there's a lot of people working in this bubble that we have, but the greatest concentration is the St. Louis metro area, the bi-state area, on both sides of the river, St. Charles.
So just a question for everyone, and a very broad one, and we'll sort of see where we go with this. What are you looking for when you first press play on a film? What are you looking for? You've got a notepad ready, you're ready to sit back and see what this film is about. What are you looking for in that film when you start to watch? Anyone can go.
For me, it depends on the event. The St. Louis films, chances are I know the filmmaker or somebody involved in the film. I do read a little bit more and do more research and watch stuff and get a preconception of what I'm about to watch, knowing when I'm gonna have to watch, I'll watch all of it for the duration for this, for the film, and then get a sense of, where it could fit in with the program. Q-Fest, I'll just sort of, I get a list from submissions and things from distributors. Same thing with the International Festival. We have stuff coming from lots of directions, from sales agents, from distributors that want to charge us money, submissions, people that want us to play, a lot of people we've never heard of before, from all over the world. So there's a lot of math going on, and it's more than just one person. So we have a much larger committee doing that. We're looking for a good story. Is my first answer. The best possible unique storytelling. Why is not just me? Why is any of you that I'm talking to, or my mom or my sister? What film is the most universal that everybody's going to enjoy? A genre film like a zombie film is not going to be for everyone, but what is something that I could send any festival on the country and the planet? It's going to be equally embraced as a good piece of cinema. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. Angela, what about you?
Yeah, great stories is certainly like what Chris said. I think for True False in particular, my colleague Amir summed this up really well. It's like looking for a sense of discovery in a film, something that's new, that's exciting. I think the nonfiction form, there's a lot of room to play with that. And then also in a lot of ways, you sort of get hemmed in. And so finding something that feels really unique. And I think I personally generally tend to, if someone is taking risks, I'm more willing to go along with that than someone who is not. I would generally say that my taste, and I would say overall True False tends to lean a little more experimental. Maybe that's not the right word, but more willing to go with people that are trying something different versus like a pretty straightforward polemical documentary. So in that realm, I think the sense of discovery in something that feels new is always a really great place to start when you hit play. Discovery
sums it up in one word. That's perfect. That says everything.
Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's all about the story. We're just looking for a good story, something that's original, something that's interesting, something that's engaging, something that captures our attention emotionally and gets us involved. And on top of that, I'm also looking at the storytelling. Is this a competent storytelling? Do they know how to use film to tell this story and make it interesting and engaging? So there's a competency that you're looking for, but it really just boils down to, do you have a good story to tell me?
Angela mentioned a little bit about what one of her colleagues said, the mission or what the festival's looking for. Do you have something either in your head or maybe even in writing about each festival and what sort of film or what sort of storytelling it wants? I'd throw that out to Chris and Brian both, since we haven't talked about that with y'all.
Things can go in so many different directions. Brian, what do you think?
Well, the Film Fest, Kansas City Film Fest, is just kind of the general film festival for Kansas City. So it's not like we're looking for specific kinds of stories or anything like that. We're looking for more of a general audience kind of. This is probably a little more of a mainstream appeal, because we don't have a niche audience that we're trying to attract. So yeah, it's very kind of general and broad.
I guess, for the classic French Film Festival is very specific, and Q-Fest goes to a specific audience, in one sense, an LGBTQ plus audience, but we want films that are also engaging to others, that it's not just, you don't have to be part of that special club to enjoy these films, and when things that are more engaging to all. The St. Louis Filmmaker Showcase, the best possible stories. There's no theme. We don't program like, women's films, or in any events that we do specifically, there's always sections, but we don't want to box ourselves in and saying we're going to do this type of film this year. And what if there aren't that type of film that year? So in general, we have different categories or experimental categories that pop up in the different events, but we don't have a theme per se. The Top Gun of film. The best is the best.
So a little talk about the audience here. Angela, do you have a picture in your mind of the typical True False audience member, and are you trying to program to that?
Well, that's a great question. Mostly because I'm new to True False programming, so that's a distinction. I worked in the tech end. I think we have these conversations a lot. First and foremost, we're going to program great films. And I think that really drives the programming, and ultimately it's not determined by the audience. That being said, like when you think about a program holistically, trying to think about the ways in which you can you have something for everyone, as it were. So, there's always sort of more general audience, like crowd pleasing films, but also things that we just really love and are championing, and are not really sure how an audience is going to react to it. And I think that's like my favorite part of a film fest, when you go to a screening and people walk away and they're like, I don't really know how to feel about that, but I really want to talk about it. Or even if, people get really angry about something and then want to talk about it. I think the experience of being in a room together and trying something that you are basically putting your trust into those curators and saying, I'm going to go with you for this because you think I should see this. And then what comes afterwards is kind of the best part of seeing how people parse it out. I think it'd be a bummer if you just, walk away and you're like, yeah, that was fine. And then the conversation ends there. So I think that really helps inform a lot of the conversations we have about thinking about slots and how many films we have and where things go and how to balance that out.
Risk and challenging films and risk and things, so the filmmakers that take a risk, share that risk. If it's successful, share it with people that connect it with people.
Chris and Brian, do you attend the screenings when the festival rolls around, when we have it in person, and sort of see how people react to your decisions?
I'm the commander of the ballot scores. So I the collector of all the ballots. So I know a little bit. Yeah, of course, I'll peek my head in a little bit. I don't have time to sit down and watch anything, but I like to know. And, I'm always mindful of watching people's faces and expressions, and sometimes multiple languages in a lobby after a film. If it's, two different foreign films from two different countries, and then a mixture, of English and various languages, that's always very exciting to me to hear that cross-cultural examination of a story. I have been known to stand in the back of a auditorium and start clapping if no one else has yet, and get the ball rolling, and then I'll walk out. It's theater. But sometimes people don't know. Was this good? Am I supposed to have liked this? Well, yes, you are. Here, I'll start.
I have purposefully arrange my volunteer work so that when the festival finally rolls around, I'm free to go and just attend as many films as I possibly can and watch as much as I can. Even though I spend September to January watching films, and I feel like I've seen everything there is ever made, by the time the festival rolls around, there's dozens and dozens of things I still haven't seen. So it's my chance to go in there and try to.
You're lucky. I see maybe one per year. I'm always doing something, but good for you.
I'm sort of interested in, and we don't necessarily have to name names here, but what's sort of your biggest programming failure, where you said you thought something would be the audience favorite or really get people talking, and it was sort of a flop? We don't need to name films, but maybe you can name the circumstances where it happened.
I don't know if the one that comes to mind, when I was at Milwaukee Film, we had a showcase. We would do a program like focusing on a specific country. And I think that year we did a showcase on China, and we used that sort of loosely. And we had this Tibetan film, and I was just really excited. And I was like, this is one of the first years I was programming, so it was like young and just really like, oh, we have a Tibetan film. This is great. People in Milwaukee, Wisconsin are never going to watch something from Tibet. And people came out, including my mother. I forget the name of the film, but a dog is killed in it. And that was my first lesson of like, you can't kill animals on screen. And people are just streaming out. My mother was like, I am so disappointed in you. I can't believe that you did this. And that was like such a weird, that moment of like, oh, I thought people would be excited to experience something that they wouldn't normally. And their takeaway was like, you are a terrible person for showing a film that killed a dog.
Chris and Brian, anything come to mind?
Nothing really. There's been so many, big studio films that we've had that have sort of flopped over time, and things you don't really expect. And we pay rental fees for films from all over the world, and sometimes they're expensive from a foreign sales agents. And when they were filmed, they had to be shipped in heavy film cans all across the world at used to be $800 to $1,200 sometimes to send a film back to Hungary, just shipping, much less the print fee. So when those don't work, you're just losing buckets loads of money. I can't really drag anything out. There was one sad instance where I knew a film was terrible. I knew it was worse than terrible, but a sponsor came to the table and made it happen. And I'll never talk about it again. I'll regret it for the rest of my life, because it was a terrible decision for money for a nonprofit. And I shouldn't have done it. And the reactions, I wish I would have saved more of the reactions from the ballot forms. People took time to write on the back of the ballot form how bad they felt it was. Is their number less than 0 that I can I vote a negative vote so as to take votes away from other people? So
I got it.
Pleasing the wrong God there was a sad,
Right.
sad mistake, and I'll never do that again.
Yeah. And, I use the word failure in this question, but as I think about it, I had a true false experience. This was before Angela's time, but a very challenging film. It's about cannibalism. Some of you might know the film I'm thinking about from a few years ago, that I thought was terrific, but I watched the audience, about a quarter of the audience, get up and leave at about 3 different spots in the film, where they were like, the first one was, I'm not staying for this. And then we got about halfway through and another group's like, I can't make it anymore. And so maybe there was about a quarter of the audience left at the end, but I think it was a great programming success for that quarter of an audience, that was a film that we really wanted to see. And so I don't know if there are any failures, maybe.
Stacey, I do want to point out that film played at the Overlook Film Festival, a horror film fest, genre film fest, and people were walking right out too, and had a similar thing because they balloted, and it was like, how do I give this less than a 1? This is the worst thing I've ever seen.
You've engendered passion for the art of the cinema.
Exactly.
You've done your job. You've done your job.
I'll take a slight little detour because of what you mentioned, Chris. And so sponsors can come in and pay for films to run in some of these fests. I don't know if everybody's doing that, or is that, or have you stopped doing that?
That was a rare exception, and there was a personal connection. There was a lot of reasons why it happened. No, you cannot, or you should not be able to. There should not be a pay to play scenario. I don't think that. I think it exists, but in general, I can't imagine that it's prevalent anywhere, truly, because that's not what we do.
Right. I don't think True False or KC Film Fest do that. No. So let's talk a little bit about, you're here representing programmers, but your festivals have screeners, and I know because I do for a couple of those. So who are the screeners, and what is their role before the film gets to you? I'm not sure everybody has sort of a transparent view of what happens there.
Some are film critics, some are film lovers, some are just people that are volunteers that would be an audience member. So I have a wide, for the international festival, I have the biggest pocket of people, probably 15 or 20. And it's a little bit of everybody, because there's an older couple that's been volunteers for a long time. And so they're a typical audience member. They are the demographic that's going to go. So I'd love to get their perspective on things that are a little more challenging. People that are either film critics or, further webbed into film world, I appreciate their voices more. They can kind of speak to structure and technique and writing, sometimes much more viciously than a normal viewer would, but that's what I want. I want, we have a limited amount of time and hundreds of hours, things to watch. I want things whittled down to the bone. And if something is not viable, we don't get to the A minuses or the B pluses. We got to stick to the top of the things that everyone loves the most. With a few, like Angela said, there's always a few, die in the wool. I love this film. I'm going to put it in there, and I know no one's going to like it. Everyone's got some every year. You have to. That's one of our true joys. But for the most part, you have to program for the masses and other people, and not just your own personal taste. So it's a big tightrope. You got to like it. I program things that I don't like, knowing that other people will, certainly.
Angela, how's the screener process work with True False?
Yeah, so I think on average, we usually get about over 1,000 submissions, and that's separate from things that our programming staff solicits. And so we have a really robust screening committee that's filled with same thing like what Chris said. We have some filmmakers. Stacey, you have been very generous with your time with us, and just generally people that really like the fest and want to come. And we try to get a nice diversity of folks so we can get a lot of different voices in. So our screeners are watching everything all the way through once, and they provide us both with feedback as well as a synopsis. We do one thing that I really like about True False versus other places that I've worked at is that you as a screener have to identify something about that film that you like, and you write that down so that we have bits and pieces to send to filmmakers, even if we reject their film, as a way to encourage them to keep going. Because, but you know, on what Chris said, we sometimes program things that we just really love, but also I definitely have had to let go of films that I really love because they just didn't fit. It wasn't best for the program. So our screeners are getting eyes on things, and then the programming staff comes in and starts to pick through things that are both highly rated, and you know, we spot check things that we'll read a review and be like, did you really not like this, or is this just a taste thing? And so we come in for a second watch, at least sometimes a third or fourth. We'll move things around our screening committee, so everything's watched in full at least once, probably twice, before you're either accepted or rejected.
I think that's an important point for filmmakers, and I know this is true at Cinema St. Louis, and I think it is at KC Film Fest, that the screeners or the programmers watch the entire film. So it's not like if you submit your film, we're going to watch the first 10 minutes and say, oh, this is no good, and kick it out. People watch it all the way through, and sometimes they really are no good, but we still watch them all the way through, and sometimes they get better than the first 10 minutes. So Brian, what about on at KC Film Fest International? How's the screening process work there?
Yeah, all of the screeners for the film festival are volunteers. So they're all just giving up their time to watch all of these films. As I said, they'll spend basically September through January watching films. I know I watch about 100 short films every year, and I only see about half of them that are submitted. So I'm on one different team of screeners than the other team. We try to make sure each film gets watched 3 times, 3 different judges. So if someone doesn't like a film, maybe the other 2 will like it, and it can still get in that way. So it's not just the taste of that one person, whether they like that film or not. So we try to make sure you get a few people's opinions on that. And then I think usually Veronica, who's the director of the festival, she will watch all of the top entries, you know, to make a final decision about whether to be in the festival or not. So.
Angela, you mentioned submissions versus what the programmers solicit. So talk a little bit about that process. You get, 1,000+ submissions, but you're out looking for films, and you'll reach out to filmmakers directly, right?
Yeah, so that looks like a couple different things. We actively attend other film festivals based on when our fest normally is, which it would have been the beginning of March. We have programmers at IDFA in the Netherlands, Toronto, and Sundance. And then we're looking at programs at other festivals throughout the year to try to solicit things. The other thing that we do is we keep track of filmmakers that, whether they're alumni, or we take, press releases from like labs and institutes like Firelight Media, Chicken and Eggs, etc., and start pulling out names and oh, sorry.
We've got
weird echo.
It went away, I think.
Okay, cool. And pulling out names and tracking people and seeing like, oh, this project sounds really interesting. We probably can't get it this year. We'll keep in touch with them for next year. And so it is very much about research for soliciting and trying to find things that we think will fit with our fest. So a lot of that time is going through other programs and tracking down filmmakers to see what they have.
Chris, do you solicit films for your festivals and kind of keep an eye out in the same way?
The showcase, no, because it's all submissions. QFest, yes. International Festival, absolutely. We have a couple tiers, the biggest of all for the International Festival, the big splashy end of the year Oscar bait studio films that are kind of like tent poles that are going to come out in 2 weeks anyway, but people want to see. But then there's a whole tier of things from distributors and sales agents that we know are out in the world. We know have played to great acclaim and awards at other festivals. Then also, of course, we don't go to as many festivals, but we have the internet and we have time. So we will scour programs and award lists from fests that we think are good meshes with our programming. This will be our 30th year of SLIF. So we have a lot of past relationships and people that have made films over time that may have made a short when they were in school and they, keep submitting and then they're a famous person all of a sudden. Lots of stuff like that, kind of pay attention to what's going on. Position our time of the year is unique that we are leading up to in the before 4 times was the end of the year Oscar stuff. Then it was in January and then the show was in February. So we were by position in November, we were automatically had things that aren't available in January and things that were at Sundance may have kind of filtered through the system, may have been in theaters in June or May. So all those things don't make as much stuff. So we all kind of do the same thing in different ways. Depends on where we are in time, where we are in the country, what is the size of our event. We're much larger, I think, than the Kansas City Film Festival. So we have a different budget, I think, and level of things that we and amount of films we can do. So that you program differently. QFest is much smaller. There's only 12 programs, half of which were submissions and others were films from sales agents. And, I had to really whittle down what I was able to offer for these films this year. And I was able to get some pretty good bargains, but low ticket totals.
Yeah.
We're geofenced Missouri and Illinois for that event for cap of 100 tickets, which seems really low, but we didn't get it to anything last year except for the free shows. So we're going to take a chance on low prices versus a low cap and see what happens.
We're talking about dates and we probably ought to run through everybody's festivals. So at Cinema St. Louis, so the big International Film Festival is in November.
November 14th to the 25th.
Yeah.
The showcase is in July 16th to the 25th of July. QFest is in next month, 16th to the 25th of April. And the Classic French Film Festival, I don't remember because I don't work on it. I think it's in May and June. I think it's over a couple of weekends, and I don't remember.
Sounds about right.
It's on our website.
Mm-hmm. Angela, true false, typically, as you say, the first weekend in March, there was a weird vacuum in Columbia that just went by that we didn't have it, but this year it will be in May. So dates on that one.
Yes, May 5th through 9th, and we're doing an in-person festival at Stevens Lake Park here, as well as a really limited, small, curated virtual fest versus putting the whole thing online. We're taking a smaller amount of those films and trying to make that a bit more of a special experience for our filmmakers and audiences.
Did you do one last year? Was there one last year, but it was before everything happened? Okay.
I think it was really the last.
Yeah, I was trying to remember
festival.
my timing. Okay, yeah. So
last major festival before the end. So the plan is to go back to March next year, right?
Correct. Yes, the dates I think already announced. It's the first weekend in March,
which puts you right, more or less right after Sundance. And we're going to talk about Sundance a little bit more later. But as Cliff talked about, where you are matters. Brian, KC Film Fest, April, doing its second virtual fest.
It is April. It's coming up in about a month away, April 12th through 18th. And this year is our 25th anniversary. We kind of wish we could make a bigger deal about that, but since we're online, there's not much we can do. So
let's turn to talk a little bit about submissions and maybe get into some of the nuts and bolts of that. So I'll start out with a broad question, and I might narrow this down a little bit, but what, from each of your perspective, what's the biggest mistake filmmakers make when they're submitting?
You've uncorked that bottle. Okay.
Yeah, we'll spend the next half hour on this probably.
If there's a list of rules and requirements, follow them. If the programmers ask you for a certain thing at a certain time, give it to them. It's that simple. If you don't have your materials ready and things are misspelled and you miss deadlines, it's like grade school. You're going to get a bad grade or you're not going to get paid attention to it. Film can be great, but if they're completely unorganized with getting you materials, you're not the only one. You're not the only kid. You're not the only niece. There's hundreds and thousands of films that we're working on at the same time. And we've got timelines and deadlines of our own. And we might love you, but be organized. This is your thing. You want people to know it. Have the images, have your stuff ready. It's shocking how much it doesn't happen in the submission process for a first-time filmmaker, and they're new to it. And I get it.
Angela,
I
go ahead.
think the one thing, true, false, the obvious answer is submitting fiction films that are like very obviously fiction and are not playing with the nonfiction form in any way. I always feel really bad about that because you're paying money to submit to our fest. So, but I think that also ties into this idea of like, know the festival that you're submitting to and have a good understanding of what they're going to program. So if you have, a horror short and that festival does not have any track record of programming horror films, then it's sort of like you're wasting your own money essentially by submitting to a place that's ultimately not going to show your film. This is a small gripe. I think mostly I haven't had too many terrible experiences. But don't change your password on your screener. and if you do, let the festival know, because it sucks when it's the middle of the night, you're trying to watch something and you're like, I have a dead link or a password that doesn't work, and now I have to go and track that person down. It's just, it's a bit frustrating.
Yeah, any extra work that shouldn't be there, you got to make it seamless to get it into your hands and attention. It's got to be a smooth process.
Right.
Ryan, how about on your end?
Am I muted?
No, we hear you.
Okay. I think Chris sums it up. Read the rules. Read what the film festival is looking for. Read all their rules and follow them. And don't think you can be an exception because you're one of hundreds of people submitting to the film festival. I would say finish your film before you submit it.
Yes. Yeah, I have that blasted all everything. No works in progress because it's probably not going to get done. Oh, well, I'm almost done. Almost is not done.
Yeah. And pay attention to the deadlines and submit your film before the deadline. You don't necessarily have to wait until the last second to get your film in. Because it just gives the festival time to plan ahead and see what's coming in and what they've got to deal with. So
what should filmmakers have together before they start the submission process? So what all will your festivals need from a filmmaker? It's more than just the film, right? They've got other things they need to provide.
Well, if I could back up for just a second. So this for us, and I assume it is for the others, this is also an income stream for us too. So there's a fee in most cases. So it's part of our budget. So there's a little bit of money involved. Not a huge amount, but I think that needed to be said. I don't need everything to look at it, but when it's time and the time is posted, when decisions are made and I ask you a question, I want this and this and this, images for the program website, the film, now we need the file to go on to up into the cloud somewhere, but we need these things in a certain timeline to get it all organized so we can look at it and make sure that the file we have is projection worthy. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe the download it's sloppy, or maybe if you sent us a disk, it's cracked or something. We need to have all these things ready, but we don't need it all. We don't need it all ready just to watch it. But when it's time is time. So have all the assets available, trailer if you have one, synopsis. Filmmakers are terrible writers of synopses of their own films is a big thing that we giggle about at Cinema St. Louis, that they're rewritten almost every time.
Brian, Angela, anything else that you need from filmmakers, either at the time of submission or maybe at the time of acceptance or getting to that level?
We need like publicity stills, pictures and stuff. The marketing for the film festival happens long before the film festival, and we need the materials to market the festival with. So we need the images for your films. We need your press kit and all of that kind of information well in advance of the festival. Not just the film itself. So
don't start re-editing once you get accepted. That happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we're pretty forgiving about that stuff at True False. We do get stuff that's rough. Well, we've considered works in progress, and we've actually shown some at the fest as such, like saying this is a work in progress. I think a good rule of thumb, this is what I tell my students, is to be at least in picture lock. So if you don't have your sound and your color done, that's fine. I think you should say that, like in your Vimeo link, like picture lock, no color, no sound, no VFX or whatever that you're going to put. I think that's a good rule of thumb because programmers are also thinking about runtimes. And so putting together a schedule, if you do change your runtime, that could really throw off an entire schedule. Yeah, and just to echo, having good stills is really important. And being prepared for those deadlines. So once, I think it's all about like making a plan for your film. So even before you submit, you should have a timeline mapped out of like what's realistic for you to complete your film, like done, finish, wrap a DCP and get it to a festival. If that doesn't match up with a festival timeline, you're going to have a big problem because yeah, you have to deliver your film at some point. And I think that's where filmmakers get stuck. There's a lot of like tweaking that happens after you're accepted, and ultimately that's not the time to be tweaking. That should have happened before. Yeah, so stills and a realistic timeline of when you could actually deliver your final film is crucial to the process.
We've had a little jargon here and there, and I'm not sure at the level of people watching if they'll understand everything either now or watch the recorded one. So you mentioned a DCP, and so do all three festivals play from DCP, and does somebody want to explain what those are?
Digital cinema package is, if you've been to the movies in the last 10 years, that's what you're watching for the most part in the multiplex. It's a file on a hard drive that gets shoved into their system, and it comes out on the other end in 4K or 2K brilliance. So most of us do, or we do now when we're actually in theaters. This past year has been different.
And how do filmmakers get a DCP? Can they make those themselves? Do they have to pay somebody to make those?
It's getting better. We worked 2 years ago. We worked with Simple DCP in Los Angeles to get as the clearinghouse and checker and make sure the submitted DCPs from all over the world were viable for play, and then could make them for filmmakers. Filmmakers can make them, but there's a wild west of programs, and some are not viable in all projection systems, and they don't always work.
Yes, to that. We require a DCP for exhibition with backup. Now we're transitioning to digital files versus Blu-ray, but there is a really wonderful open source program that I use and a lot of other technicians do called DCP-O-Matic. It's got a really funny name, but there's a German software engineer who made it, and he's really responsive. And the DCPs that I've created and other people, they work well. Some of that software, like Easy DCP, is really expensive. I've had a lot of issues with Raptor that doesn't work quite as well. There's a lot of different. Yeah, sorry. This is where I'm like,
yeah. Well, that's why a lot of people want to use Raptor DCP, because it's built into Premiere. So they're like, oh, this is easy.
What was
it maybe.
Stacey, we
Oh,
had
I'm-
some issues with some films from Colombia in real life, like 2 years ago, that they were made with a certain program and they weren't
Mhm.
meshing very well with our system. So
Yeah.
it does happen, and everyone's had to learn these things so quickly. So it's all getting sorted out and sifted down into what works best. But we had hard issues with films that kept getting submitted, and it just, for one line of code in this specific program, just scotched it all. So we
Mhm.
fixed it, but it does happen.
I think ultimately, if you're an independent filmmaker, whether you're editing your own work or you're working with an editor, it's really important, I think, for your budget to learn what a DCP is and how to make one, because that cost adds up pretty quickly. There's certainly, you can't necessarily check a DCP through DCP-O-Matic, because I think Chris's synthesis was totally accurate. I think the biggest thing that filmmakers need to understand is a DCP does not play back on a laptop, for example. It has to mesh with a very specific server. And so this is also why it's really important to make those deadlines, because festivals will have a technical team that's going to be taking the time to check your file, whether it's running it through other software or putting it on screen. And so it's not just like handing over your Mac file, or whatever.
We chose your film. We want to show it. We want to show it in the best way possible to the audience.
Right.
So help us, on time and the right thing. And we know that it's difficult for the user as everything's changing. In 20 years of doing it, we had film and HD cam and discs, and everything changes so rapidly that it's hard to keep up. But
Right.
everybody wants to show the best possible presentation of your film to our audience, to everybody's audience. But it's your film. You want it to be good too, we think. We hope.
Let's talk. Angela mentioned budgeting, and so let's talk a little bit about the costs that filmmakers might see. And so I think when they're ready to submit, one of the first things they're going to encounter is that there are fees to submit to your festival. And as Chris said before, it's a revenue stream for the festivals that helps run them. So with most festivals, the earlier you submit, the cheaper it is. And if you're a person who's going to run it right to the deadline, or sometimes the extended deadline that festivals have, you're going to pay the most at that point. When do most people submit? Are they making the regular deadline, the late deadline? When do you see these come in?
The last minute.
Last minute, every time. It's like clockwork. Because it's human nature, and people are working on it up until the last minute, and that's okay. But there has to be realistic, expectations of time after that. And there is a small period of time where you can still work on it in between, but it's a short window.
So a word to the wise is, if you can control yourself and get it done by an earlier deadline, you'll probably pay a little bit less to submit.
Yeah, into the fee structure. So filmmakers are artists and creative brains. I'm an event producer, so I have a creative side and a businessy side. Filmmakers need to learn how to treat their project as a business. How many thousands and thousands of times over time do I get the same sentence and same sad plea from filmmaker? Oh, we've spent all of our money making our film. We don't have a single nickel left for the submission process. Well, you're in this business. How do you not know that there is going to be things you need later? So you have to factor it in budget wise from the beginning, knowing what there's plenty of things that are free, but if you limit yourself to only free entry festivals, then it's limiting. So there has to be a budget for leftover for stuff after the fact, or there's going to be something you have to fix in editing. You're going to have a leftover bill, and you have to have a budget for submissions if you want to be serious about it. And it's a black hole of expense, and I get it. It can be as much as the film sometimes, depending on the budget of the film.
So there is such thing as a waiver. So each of you can offer a waiver to a filmmaker, which means you can send in your submission and we won't charge you. So everybody would love to have a waiver, but who gets those? Who do you consent to give those to?
Our waiver policy is for a director of a film that we've shown who has directed a new film that they want to submit. They themselves have it directed, but only for the bigger festivals, not for the showcase, because that's where we make an exception, because everybody it's so interrelated. We would never charge any admission fee for anything. So I have to do a hard line for that. Sometimes there's exceptions, but I get dozens of emails every day from the country of Iran because there's a banking sanctions and they can't. So I have to say no 24 times a day, but every once in a while, someone will write a nice letter. People who truly have true need, but I get dozens of requests from filmmakers. I ran out of my budget, or I ran out of my budget right before we applied to your festival, or I was in this festival. They told me I should get a waiver from you. I hear it all. So I fight back a little bit at a time.
Ryan, what about KC Film Fest? You know how liberal it is with waivers?
I know that we occasionally give out waivers, but I'm not the one that does that. So I don't really want to speak and say, this is what we do and this is our policy. I know that everyone wants one and are always asking for waivers, but it's only under special circumstances because it is our revenue stream. This is how
it never hurts to ask, but have a good reason, and don't just say, hey, I made a film, give me a waiver, which is most of them, and then click.
Angela, how about you? Your experience with waivers when you want to give, is that your choice? I didn't ask that. Do the programmers get to decide in each case?
Like Brian, those decisions usually don't come to me. I'm of two minds of this. When I was at Milwaukee Film, the founder was a filmmaker before he founded that festival, and so the fest never and still doesn't have. They don't charge submission fees because his thought was that filmmakers are spending a lot of money to make these films. There's not a ton of support, and so that part I fully stand behind. This is particularly in our country, it's really hard to make films in a lot of ways. It's really expensive and not a ton of money. The way in which we approach submission fees at True False is that, just to circle back to what I was saying about the screening committee, is that we appreciate that filmmakers will use their money to submit to our festival and allow us to watch their film. And that is why every film is watched at least once, if not more times. And they get a personalized letter from a programmer. It feels like that is an exchange, right? Like you're paying for our services to watch your film, and therefore we value that, and we provide feedback. And so this is the only fest I've worked at that has done that. I like that model. It's really time consuming. And so I'm sending rejection letters at really weird hours of the night, but I ultimately think it's, I feel better about it that that we are taking your money, yes, and it's helping us put on this festival, and therefore I should be giving you something in return if we're not programming your film. So it's a tough one. I mean, nonprofits aren't making money, filmmakers,
and we're not just rolling around on these piles of money. They go back into produce. Its income stream is not. It doesn't. We're not driving fancy cars and not. Have throwing lavish parties. They go back into the basic nuts and bolts of producing the event, paying people that are programming team, paying renting theaters, paying for the programs. We spend it on the filmmakers that are selected. It goes back into that process. It's not that kind of riches where we're just like throwing bundles of cash around. It goes right back into the machine and supports the filmmakers that are selected. So if you get your film is selected, then you get free tickets and you get to go to a party, and there are things that you get.
Right. People who are writing questions in the chat, I'll get to those in a moment. I'm going to ask a couple of more things and we'll turn to some of your questions. So let's see, first of all, two fests here use Film Freeway, and then True False has its own submission system. So does anybody care to walk us through the Film Freeway process in case people are unfamiliar with that? What is Film Freeway?
Film Freeway is a submission portal. I guess the biggest in the land now. That there was another big one that's now gone. But filmmakers from all over the world with one-stop shopping can put their film and their images and their film file or a link to the film and information about themselves, running times, all this information about the film in one spot, and then they can go to a list of film festivals, and some are free and some are for fees, but they can click. And instead of filling out what used to be a paper form and mailing a VHS tape back in the olden times, and putting in the mail and sending it in, and, you know, have stacks of tapes, things laying around, it can, by click in virtual, they can submit electronically. And then the filmmakers or the producers will get an email. This film has been submitted. It's all in the same file. And then we can assign viewers easily. Stacey, I don't know how many lists you're on of different events for us. Then we can assign films or assign a filmmaker. Okay, you can see all the films in this bucket. So it's easy to share resource, instead of, you know, I used to have to make stacks of VCRs and make 4 copies of a tapes at a time and mail them or drive them to people's houses for committees to watch. Now it's electronic and simpler and easier, but the volume is much higher. So there's a lot of work to be done. And what do you do with the data is a big later part of the discussion. You know, what do you do with all this data?
And then Angela, True False runs its own submission system, but it works in a similar way, right? People are able to upload everything they need to that.
Yes, we don't, at the submission time, we don't ask for stills or anything, which is a nice perk of Film Freeway. I've used that before as well. That part, our database is like capturing the very basic information. And then once films are accepted, we have another database system that we use to get everything else we need for our program book.
Okay, well, that's a good segue into my next question is, so a filmmaker gets accepted into one of your festivals. What happens then? What should they expect? This may be their very first festival they've been accepted into. So what will they hear from you?
For us, it's we write them a nice email accepting them and tell them why we love their film. And then everything happens pretty quickly. So this is, again, where timeline management becomes really important, because we're going to right off the bat ask for high resolution stills, and any other promotional materials, whether it's press kit, posters, etc. We write our own synopses, so that actually doesn't really influence, but we do immediately start the process of getting the exhibition formats and sending out information about timelines. In the before times, it would also be like, will you come to the festival? And figuring out hospitality. And we have what's called the Pay the Artists initiative. And so every year we pay our filmmakers directly, and which is separate from, you know, paying sales agents or having to secure rights with distributors. But that process happens right away as well. So we can ultimately get our filmmakers paid so that, yeah, they have money and can come. We cover travel and everything too. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, that was the other question.
Yeah.
So in the regular fest, the March Fest, you would pay for one person from the film to come, because True False, I think, is a little bit unique in that part of the acceptance is that you agree to send, hopefully the director, but at least a major figure in the film there, right?
Right. So I think it's, and I apologize because this is really, again, my first year going through this process in a very strange year. We do require attendance for feature films, and that I think ultimately could mean, you know, sometimes people can't get here depending on what country they're in. So we do live Q&As in those instances via Zoom or Skype. And we do offer something to shorts filmmakers, and I'm so sorry, I actually don't know what it is because this year it's a little bit different, but we do have.
If I remember right, I think you have lodging for them, but they have to make their own way to Columbia. I think
that sounds right. Yeah.
Chris, with Cinema St. Louis, is there any compensation to the filmmakers for travel or screening fees or anything like that?
It's all over the place. Some people we will invite, some people we will do different levels of housing and travel and compensation for if they're part of a specific juried award. And then the people that sort of come, hey, we're coming, what can you do for us? we'll do as much as we can at that level. You know, at the very least, they'll get passes and invitations to dinners and meals, leftover rooms if we have them, but we have hard expenses that, you know, everything's not free. We have to pay something, cut rate, but, you know, cut rate of $175 room is not $40, it's $110. So it does add up, but we have drivers that can pick people up from airport, you know, pretty good expense. We don't pay everybody that participates. I wish we could do that more, like True False does. And that's a great initiative. I wish that it would be more affordable and feasible, and maybe it will in a future world, but we don't go quite that far.
Brian, how about over in Kansas City? Similar approach?
Yeah, I don't know everything that happens on that end, so I can't be certain. I know we have like celebrity guests that we've invited specifically, and we will accommodate them and pay their travel expenses. They're usually going to be like a big name actor or director or somebody who's there to attract an audience basically for the festival. But the general filmmakers, I don't think we provide accommodations for them, but we certainly will make I mean, we usually have a hotel for the festival where they can stay, and we have special discount rates for them. And we will make all kinds of accommodations to try to get them to Kansas City and get them to and from the festival and everything like that. Make it as easy as possible for them.
So part of that budgeting for your film, and as all of you have talked about, is not only submission fees, but if you want to attend the festival, you probably ought to be thinking about what travel expenses you can afford. I think it's a given every festival is going to give a pass to the filmmaker. So you're going to get some sort of filmmaker or VIP pass that you'll get.
Yeah, and a shirt, and there's always a
films.
couple of dinners and parties. There's always extra stuff, but that's not the money that gets you there.
Right. One other little nuts and bolts question, then I'm going to ask some of the questions from the Q&A. But Angela, you mentioned high resolution stills from the film. Is it okay for a frame export? That's going to be good enough for most people, right? They don't need to have had a separate photographer shooting higher resolution.
Yeah, you can just, yes, I think that's generally fine. I mean, that things are with digital editing now, I think things make it's a little bit easier than having to hire a set photographer. But if you can have a set photographer, I think that's, you know, you should do that. But yeah.
I'm always shocked at the image sets I'll get, even on Film Freeway, that are all behind the scenes, that are crew shots with cameras and grips and you know, poles and stuff. This is not at all what we're looking for. And how can they not know the difference? And even the screenshots that people send sometimes are really terrible, low resolution. I'll just go start the film and take my own if I have to. And I do it in increasing frequency to get the best shot. And it's easy. So the filmmakers can do it too. But yeah, have something ready.
Okay, let me go to some of the questions in the chat here. So Steph Shannon over at our KC Film Office asks, is it important to be an Academy qualifying festival? So we should probably define first what an Academy qualifying festival is, and then talk about whether that's important. So which of these, I think St. Louis is an Academy qualifying festival, is it not?
For narrative and documentary shorts. And what that means is the old rules is the olden times is a film had to be four-walled in a theater to be considered for an award. 20-something years ago, the Academy started with narrative shorts and now include documentary shorts in a separate system. But qualifying festivals, I think there are 50 or 60 in the United States, that if your film wins one of the top awards at one of those festivals, for the documentary shorts, it's just best documentary short. But for narrative, it's best of the festival, best live action, or if you win any of those awards, you're then eligible to submit directly to the Academy without forewalling or doing what you had to do. And the process works. We've had a film about 15 years ago that won our Best of Fest award, sent them the letter, was one of the final 5 and won. So it does happen.
Okay, Angela, is True False Academy qualifying? I should know that, but I don't know.
No, it's not.
Okay, and how about Kansas City? I don't think so.
Kansas City is not.
So
is it important? You know, do you want your film seen? you know, it's nice. If you win one of those things, what a great bonus to be able to do that. But, you know, every festival that's a smallish number. Every festival doesn't have it. Depends on where you want to be shown.
Okay.
I think it's a bigger question too of, is it the festival that you're submitting to a competitive festival? So True False is not. We don't do audience awards, we don't do jury awards. And so I think figuring that part out in advance is good as well, because if you want, like if you're looking either for that Academy qualifying, or if you want, you know, a prize package or a cash prize or whatever it is, you may want to target a festival that does have some type of juried component if that's important to you.
Sometimes that's the goal of a filmmaking team. They want awards to further the message about themselves as much as the film. That can be a goal. That's okay. But be realistic if it is or not, or just you made a film, you want people to see it. You know, that's a different kind of goal. Yeah,
let's talk about awards for a minute. And True False set itself up not to do awards, so we'll let Angela take a little break here. But the other festivals do have awards. Who are your juries for that? Is that set up similar to your programming teams? You use filmmakers. Who juries those awards?
Kansas City. It's not the screeners that jury the awards. We have a jury of people, and they're generally filmmakers or people, professors, filmmakers, people who are experienced and have, you know, some good working knowledge of film and filmmaking, and they jury, and we have several awards in multiple categories.
People smarter than me is what we do. Yeah, like Brian said, you know, not the committee members, because that would not be fair, because there's conflict of interest, but film critics, authors, writers, you know, we try to, for the international festival, we try to get people on a national scale that are not just local people. You know, we have a mixture, so it's, you know, outside of us, outside of our usual circle, so it's, you know, more legit, and, you know, it's a better standing. And then, you know, the award itself then means more than if it's just a couple of my friends watching and said, hey, we like that film. Well, if, you know, if somebody, a writer from the you know, Time Magazine or the New York Times or the Washington Post, if somebody with much better credentials and much smarter than me said so, then it means more. So the Chip asks, if the programmers are looking at two films that are close to the same topic, is there a chance that the festival would program both of them? The Summer of the Zombie film from a couple of years ago in the showcase, I had 3 zombie features and I have limited slots. I only picked one. And there was an argument at the closing night party. Why didn't I pick the other one? You know, I picked what I thought was the better film. If we had 100 films, there might be room for 3 zombie films. But if you only have a small slate of, you know, 16 programs and only 6 of those are narrative features, there's other films and there's other voices. Short answer is no for me. Angela, you mentioned before about programming maybe international films together at Milwaukee, I think you said it was. Do any of the festivals try to program a block of films that tackle a similar geography, similar subject matter, anything like that?
True False does it. I will say it's funny that you asked that, because we were having that conversation about 2 films that were on the same topic. I don't think, I'm not sure if that, and it's hard if they're both fantastic films. What do you do? Yeah. They're both just so good, but they do the same thing. It's really hard. I think the distinction is, like, do they do different things with the same topic? And then that opens up different possibilities, but it's a fun hypothetical. We approach that all the time because of, like, in documentary filmmaking, I think there's people are passionate about similar things, and ultimately we do get films that kind of are similar based on topic. So, well, you'll get not this year, but probably for next year's festival, a ton of pandemic films. So I already did. Oh, you already got them. All right, the quick turnarounds already came in. Yeah, the COVID docs. Yep. Yeah, and we've seen. Yeah, I guess that's true. We've seen those have been out for quite a while. People turn those around quickly. Brian, over in Kansas City.
Any thematic programming?
A lot of those COVID documentaries already seem dated. They seem dated, 5 months ago when we watched them. So it's really tricky. With the, I do the short films, and of course we like to group the short films together into a program when we're having a regular festival. We're not really doing that online, but you want to group the shorts into a program. So yeah, you're looking for short films that are similar enough to each other that thematically you can group them together and say, here's a theme, and if you like this theme, go watch these films. And then you have a group of films that are comedies. There's always like the comedy group, but with dramas and stuff, there's always so much variety. You need to come up with themes. But yeah, there's usually a group of films, 3 or 4 films that are pretty much all about the same thing. And you would think, oh, well, we'll just make a category and put all these films together. But usually it doesn't work that way. And usually not all of those films are of the same quality. And so you're trying to say, well, I just have to pick the best one of those 3 films.
Like the teen coming of age genre that we see over and over and over again. What makes it stand out there? And when they do, when they work, they're brilliant. But if it's the same thing over and over again, how is this perpetuating the art of the cinema and different than we've done before? And why is it special and unique? And back to discovery again, circling all the way back.
Sometimes we have a related problem where we get 2 films with the same title. And it causes confusion with the audience. It's like,
that would be really tough to program that one in the same festival. Brian mentioning shorts, a really basic question I meant to ask way back at the beginning and realized I didn't. Is there a good length both for shorts and features? Is there, does it matter how long a film is?
There's a general rule that every short film is too long and can always be shorter.
Yes, sir.
I think an ideal length is 10 to 15 minutes, and we keep seeing more and more films coming in at 20 or over 20 minutes, and those are really hard to program, especially if you're doing a live festival.
That's part of digital filmmaking, and because people can shoot endlessly for nothing, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. The austere body of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences tells us that 40 minutes or less is the length of a short, but it's actually a mini feature. And if you have 2 40-minute films, that fills up an entire program of shorts. Or do I want to show 10 8-minute films for the same length? Sometimes you have to choose. It's a Sophie's choice, and more is better when you're working with submissions, ideally. And if it's a 40-minute film, what is it that's going to anchor this whole program and be the default theme? What works best with that? So it's really hard, but I see tons of 20 to 30-minute student films that it takes up a third of a program. And, they're great. They have to be super great to justify the real estate. And I hate to think like that, but with the submission process, I want to do better. It's really got to stand out to be at that length, which is a mini feature.
Angela, what about features? Is there a good length in there that programmers look for?
True False is really liberal with that. I mean, we've been known to program some like 3+ hour films.
There's no rules at True False. You guys do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah, I did. I was gonna say.
You really do. You're unique.
It might be a tough question because you do program. I think I was singled out as watching, what was that, a 3 hour and 40-minute
feature,
I think
it,
which luckily was pretty good, but it could have been worse.
Yeah, all that to say, yes. So Chris, you're right. There are no rules. I do think that you have to just think about the whole process holistically, and I think it does tie in with shorts and thinking about like if your film is taking up 2 feature-length blocks, right? If you're like in the 3+ hour range, that your film has to be so compelling. And I'm sure Zack Snyder has a lot of thoughts about this, his recent film. But I think just be mindful of your story is really like you could have a 3 hour long film, but if you have like the right pacing and your story is compelling, then that's great. you could have a 70-minute film that's a slog, right? So I think it really more kind of comes down to like use every minute of your film for your story. I'm kind of skirting around this one. I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
trying
it's
to answer
okay.
that because
Well,
I love long films.
Yeah,
but
I'll dig in a little
it's a
bit,
personal
from, the selfish part of the businessy side of, if I have a 2.5-hour feature and I show it at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night, that means I can't show another film until 10 on a Tuesday night. And that it doesn't work. So I got to put it in a crappier spot to make time work so I can fill in all the spots. So, there's a lot of things that are not necessarily fair artistically that go into the mechanics of putting a program together. And what you said is exactly right, Angela, that it has to justify every second when it's of a certain length. Films are great when they're less than 90. Shorts are great when they're less than 10. If you can tell a perfect in and out story in less than 5 minutes, that's gold. You'll be in every festival in the world. But, once you're over 100, 110, 215, and then longer, it's hard to find the spot because you're going to have less of a spot, sadly, to have another program and sell other films and make other income. So there's a lot of things behind the scenes that are not art. It's business, but it's part of the world, and it all has to fit. And yeah, we've done 4-hour films and 3.5-hour films, but there was a 4-hour Philippine drama that we showed a couple of years ago, Lav Diaz. I can't remember the name of it. I loved it, but it was durational cinema at its slowest. And I lost a bunch of money at it, renting it. And less than 10 people showed up that night, and it took up 2 slots. I didn't care. I'm proud to have done it, but you can only do those so many times and make it viable and keep everything going. So it was art, and I'm glad it happened and those people loved it. But once a decade, you can do a 4-hour thing like that. So
one of the other things to consider in terms of volume, I guess, in programming is venue size. And when we're back and all doing in-person screenings, which, hopefully will be soon, are you looking for films that will go into a little 30-seat venue? All the festivals have some variation in venue size. And then you're also looking for the, I'll use the term blockbusters that are going to fill your 1,700-seat venues. Are you keeping that in mind as you're making selections?
it has to be part of the process
definitely.
on some level. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I think we think about it too, like particularly when we talk about films that we particularly love and we reference our venues, like, is this a big ragtag film? Is this a Jesse Hall? So, and thinking about that, because it does matter. Like, you don't want to put a really highly experimental film in a 1,700 seat house, because you're either you're not going to get you're not going to fill it, or B, you're going to get an audience that's like, that's not exactly what I was expecting in this venue. So I think the audience expectations of a venue as well, if you're using consistent venues, is really important to consider with your schedule blocking.
Everybody else sort of on the same boat there, probably. So back to our chat here. So Joni asks, seems like all of the panel said their festivals get a lot of submissions. So has the multitude of streaming platforms affected the submissions process for festivals?
I don't know what everyone else does about things that are on YouTube or on a VOD channel. We tend not to worry about them as much because it's a wild west and who's all going to see them. But like right now, I have a submission that's on YouTube now. It's a doc feature and it's already had 1,000 views. It would be the right thing to show it, but am I wasting a slot? A young filmmaker that, right now, this past year, there's nowhere else to show them but on YouTube. Do I want to punish a filmmaker for having, 50 views of a film, an event? But I have to think about it. Is the greater good been served? Has the film been seen by the people that want to see it? And can I give that spot to somebody else? There's a lot of math there. Things that I rent from distributors that might be on different VOD platforms. Well, everybody, including my mom, does not have every VOD platform, nor are they going to find this film that I'm paying for on Discovery Channel, which they don't have. So we make exceptions all the time. The big ones like Sundance said, oh no, if you're on any platform, you know, gotta be a premiere. We're pretty loose about it, but I have to think about it each and every time. And this past year's made it even harder because people have no outlet. I don't want to punish a student for, you know, like I said, being on YouTube when they have nowhere else to show their film. Then does that mean they automatically can't be in the showcase? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know what to do sometimes.
Any other perspectives on that? I want to ask about, I said I'd talk about Sundance and you brought it up here. So maybe we'll turn to that. We only have about 5 minutes before we're going to do our breakout sessions. So Sundance throws a lot of weight around in the film festival world. And you have, well, I'll let you guys talk about it. So the timing of Sundance, it's in January. So the submission's open for that, I think in August or September or something like that. And they're being, or maybe even earlier than that. And they're usually accepting films in October and November. So you hear from people who say, well, I'm going to submit to Sundance just for what you just said, Chris, because they want premieres. What's your advice on people about going for Sundance first or waiting for Sundance?
I call it the Sundance curse, you know, partly because of our timing. If they're waiting to hear something, that notification in November, well, our cutoff is in August. So if they're waiting, then August, September, October, November, December, then you get into the next year's cycle of festivals. So you can sit out 6 to 8 months of a year waiting to hear back from the one festival. And then if you don't get in, then it'll be 6 more months before you get into a festival. So just be cognizant of, I don't want to tell anyone not to have that goal. And when it happens, it's fantastic for everybody, but it doesn't happen most of the time. And you have to be aware of what you're giving up versus what your ultimate best goal is, if that makes sense.
But for the others, everybody has different timing. So,
and because we're in November, you know, something in January, you know, the timing is really terrible for someone working with us waiting for that November date. But if you're in a March or April festival, then, you know, there's still time to submit when you get the letter. So it's different, but it's a curse if you're waiting for that one thing. 8 months go by and then you've done nothing.
I think for Sundance, look, they get what, over 14,000 submissions a year. The numbers are just so vast. It's hard to wrap your head around that. I think a question that filmmakers should ask is like, what do they want for their film once it comes out, right? And Sundance might not be the best option for your film's premiere. It just might not be, for whatever reason that you pick. I think if Sundance is a goal for you, I think you need to get on their radar. So applying to their labs, applying to, you know, granting programs. A lot of the films that get into Sundance have some sort of track record with the organization before the film even premieres. And I think that that's a really important thing. They have great support programs, and I would encourage everyone to apply to them. And I think that's it makes for a great pathway if that's a goal for you.
Mm-hmm. The one last question it looks like we have time for here, or maybe I'll squeeze in two because this first one's quick. Does a film premiering at your festival matter to you? Does your film care if it has premieres?
0. As long as it's not been shown theatrically in town, so we're not duplicating something that's already been done. And even so, we even make exceptions with that. But no, film festivals are not it used to be the only time you were a true competitor if there was one print, a 35mm print of the film available, and you wanted to show it on the same day and you were in 2 different cities. That's the end of the line for me for, you know, competitor, you know, unless you're in the same market or the same city, even the same state. You know, people in Kansas City are not always going to be driving across state to see a film that we show versus a film, you know, so there are no competitors. So I say no.
Ryan? No,
I don't think it's a consideration at all with our festival.
It's great when it happens. It's
Yeah.
fun,
Mhm.
but it doesn't. You know, we're not in that big of a pond here in Missouri. You know, it doesn't matter.
We
It's not
occasionally will
stress.
get a real high profile premiere. It'll be the one big movie and we'll bring in the celebrity and say, this is the first time it's being shown. And it's even better if it has a local connection.
Yeah, those
You
are
know,
great, but you can't
Those
live
are
by that.
Unique.
No.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are unique instances.
And Angela, true false, I don't think cares much about premieres, right?
No.
It has a
Yeah.
lot. It has a lot, but you don't care
Yeah.
that much.
Yeah, we don't like, I don't even think we notate that anywhere. It's, we'll probably talk about it in person, but really we just want, you know, if we're championing a film, we want it to have a great life, and it feels weird to tell someone like, you can't play that festival, you can only play ours first. So.
Yeah. But if it had shown, you know, a month earlier at school or one of the schools or in the theaters, then maybe not. But that's not the kind of stuff that you're working with.
Yeah, I would say locally, if it's a local film that's been shown before, we're less likely to be interested because we'll assume the audience for that film has already seen it.
Yeah.
And aren't going to come to our festival to see that short film. So,
But the true false, you're getting fresh stuff, like super fresh stuff from Sundance and from all over the planet that won't be there in advance. They're not going to be at the multiplex near you. That's a different type of animal.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. The distinction.
Yours are very different. Yours are very different. So there's no chance that any of those films would have been, you know, in a big theater anywhere. But for what Brian and I do, a lot of times there could have been, especially with the local films. And people are excited and they want to do premieres. They don't want to wait for your event, and they do it. Well, it's maybe a slightly less of a reason for me to do it then. Not that it's not a good film, but the audience is gone.
Well, thanks to Chip for that question, by the way. All right, quickly, we're running into our networking time, so I won't go too long. One more time around for when your festivals are and if people can attend either in person or virtually. So I think either Chris or Brian is up next. They both have April festivals. Brian, we'll go to you. KC Film Fest.
KC Film Fest is April 12th through 18th. And it's, I think you just buy a pass and you can watch all the films you want.
Virtual Fest this year, again,
Virtual
second
Fest.
year in a row, and the passes go on sale very soon, I think, maybe next week or something.
Where are you online and where are you geo-blocked?
It's film. I'll answer as a board member of that fest. It's film by film. But some of them are geo-blocked. A lot of them are not. So
okay,
people can see it all over. Just to keep us moving. Sorry, Brian. Chris, you have Q-Fest coming up.
Q-Fest is next month. Geo-blocked to Missouri and Illinois. The showcase, we didn't geo-block at all, and we had one film shown in 8 countries. All over the world, 1,700 views for a single film, which was great. This was our best audience of all time. The Classic Film Festival is sometime this spring and or summer 2021. I don't remember the dates. I should have looked it up. And the International Festival is November 4th through the 14th in November.
Yeah. And so at least the first 3 you mentioned are virtual this year.
Yes.
Not sure about what the International Film Festival.
SLIF will be almost assuredly be a hybrid of some sort. But it's our great goal to be back in theaters and smelling popcorn and lots of voices once again.
Absolutely. And Angela, True False coming up unusually late this year.
Yeah, May 5th through 9th. We have in-person outdoor physically distanced screenings at Stevens Lake Park. And we have, if anyone has questions about like the procedures for keeping people as safe as possible, we do have a health FAQ. We're working very closely with the Boone County Health Department. So all that information is on truefalse.org.
Exciting.
All right. Well, thanks to the panel for coming out this morning. It's a nice day now to get out and enjoy. Maybe it warmed up a little bit out there. And hopefully good information for our filmmakers to be able to consider submitting to your festivals and a whole bunch more. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
A little way.
That I haven't met before.
Yep.
Are you taking over?
Yep,
Okay.
yep, I'm taking over. So don't leave and to go into that beautiful sunny day quite yet. We are going to do our second part of these sessions is the networking part, which is also something we should talk about film festivals. That is a great reason to go. A lot of filmmakers tell me they don't want to go to a film festival till they get into that festival. Blah, don't do that. Go. Check it out. You are always going to meet somebody. And this business, as we know, is also about people and networking and working together. This is the most collaborative art form there is, I think. So we're going to lose Chris, so we'll say goodbye.
I must run away.
Thank you, Chris.
We're going to lose him.
Talk to you soon. And I'd like to talk to Angela and Brian some other day, so I'll reach out. So it's nice meeting you both. Thanks, Stacey. Bye, Andrea.
Bye. This is also, if you want to hop off, a good time. If you don't want to network, it's okay. I want to give a quick plug to next month. We're going to have Justin Benard, who is a board member for the Missouri Motion Media Association, talk with us about finding financing. It's a topic that we are all talking about all of the time. So especially in these weird times. So come back next month. It's going to be April the 24th for that session. And then now we're going to go into breakout rooms and meet a few new people, I hope. These are the rules, if there are rules. First, if you'll introduce yourself, go around the circle, 4 or 5 people in each room, maybe, I don't know, we are losing people. Okay, we'll see how many we have. Introduce yourself, and then if there's time for another round, go through. Why don't you talk about a memorable film festival experience that you've had, whether with your film or seeing a film at a film festival. Sound good? All right, we're going to magically go into our rooms now. And this is the first time I'm doing it, so hope I can do it right.